Mana-mana kerajaan yang mempunyai pengaruh terhadap Israel sepatutnya mengambil pendirian yang sangat tegas dalam memastikan penyaluran bantuan kemanusiaan ke Gaza dapat disampaikan dengan lebih berkesan. Pengarah Institut Penyelidikan Keamanan Antarabangsa Stockholm, SIPRI, Dan Smith berkata, ia antara langkah yang boleh diambil untuk meningkatkan kecekapan pengagihan bantuan ke Gaza. Ia sekaligus dapat mengurangkan kesesakan di pusat pemeriksaan sedia ada seperti di Rafah.
I think that the key element here is really to do with the actions of the IDF, the Israeli Armed Forces, and therefore decisions by the Israeli government. If the bombardment stops, if the military campaign stops, if less pressure, if at least some of the pressure, but preferably all of the pressure, is released from the Rafah crossing point,
Smith menambah undang-undang kemanusiaan antarabangsa juga mengikat semua pihak termasuk Israel untuk menyediakan akses kemanusiaan kepada mereka yang terjejas.
There should not need to be negotiations. The international humanitarian law, which is binding upon everybody, including upon Israel, says that humanitarian access, providing humanitarian access, is a legal responsibility. By not providing humanitarian access, even by getting into an argument about it, that is actually defying international humanitarian law. You shouldn't have to negotiate access, you should just have it.
Mengulas lanjut, Smith berpandangan agensi-agensi kemanusiaan perlu memperkemas atau membuat inovasi bagi mempercepatkan pengagihan bantuan ke Gaza.
I think there is barely any viable alternative. One could imagine aid arriving in other ways into Israel. It's not an isolated country from world transport lines and communications, either by sea or by air or by land or by all three. But the question is whether Israel would then pass that in a meaningful way into Gaza. And I think that one of the most worrying things that we have seen in the last week or so about that is the demonstrations by Israeli teenagers and people in their early 20s blocking the humanitarian access from Israel into Gaza, and apparently doing so with the acceptance, the approval of the Israeli army and the police.
Mengenai kajian kes di zon konflik yang boleh disesuaikan di Gaza, ini jawapan Smith.
I think that the problem in Gaza, so far as I understand it, is that the access points are so few. So where you have seen innovations and humanitarian aid being delivered by a diversity of routes and in different ways and different means and by different actors, you're normally talking about a situation where you have more points of access into that country or that region of the country. But Gaza, as we know, has basically got a wall around it and a few gates in that wall. And most of those gates have been closed by Israel. And now we have essentially the focus upon the Rafah crossing point.
Sementara itu, menjawab kebimbangan konflik di Timur Tengah, beliau berkata ketika ini terdapat lebih 50 konflik bersenjata di dunia termasuk Ukraine, Sudan serta Myanmar. Begitupun beliau menyifatkan krisis di Gaza sebagai semakin meruncing.
Thus we've seen an increase in violence on the West Bank, we've seen southern Lebanon action there, and of course in the Red Sea. And I think that if what is happening now with Gaza and Rafah turns into a tragedy on a yet larger scale, I think that we could be talking about uncontrollable escalation happening. So it is of particular concern. And that escalation, it has to be said, may not only happen in the Middle East region.